Now, it's my privilege now for the next 30 minutes or so to give you an update on the work of Queensland ACL. That has included the federal election, when we letterbox dropped hundreds of thousands of leaflets and we ran forums around the state, and it was really encouraging to have media commentators and members of parliament comment on the effect that they believe ACL had on the outcome of the miracle election. We fought hard not for a party, but we fought hard because we opposed the diabolical social policies that were proposed by the opposition. We had to, there was too much at stake. It was 10 months ago that Queensland adopted, as Marilyn says, some of the most callous and evil abortion laws in our land. It is said that a nation that encourages abortion corrupts its humanity. Now, the womb should be the safest place in the world for a baby, but it's actually the most dangerous place for a baby to be. Imagine that. That completely alters the value of our nation, that the value that we place on motherhood and fatherhood. And I would say to you that the heart of our nation has actually been hardened. It's not a good place to be in. I believe our acceptance and devastatingly even our celebration of the right to kill babies in the womb is contributing significantly to the deep moral and cultural decline that we are experiencing. Because in Queensland now it is perfectly legal to abort a baby at any stage of pregnancy because they're not the desired sex, or because the timing's not quite right, or because there might be a perception that the baby's not absolutely perfect. Women experiencing an unwanted pregnancy, and there will be people in this audience who have done just that. They need our support. They need someone to walk the journey with them. They do not need a false promise of abortion being an easy way out, because that is a cruel lie. So ACL will never stop fighting against abortion, but we will never stop fighting either for the right for real support to be provided for pregnant women and their babies. Now, God says choose life, and Jesus says I am the life, and he says that he's come to give us that life in abundance. Yet our government seems obsessed at the moment with death. We have another inquiry happening now, and this one considers the legalization of euthanasia. Now, this is a tragedy, but it's also a grave injustice. This is at a time when Queenslanders are not able to access adequate palliative care, and we've heard from Professor Olver on that. We've been in Townsville and Rockhampton together running information forums, and there are 3 more forums coming up in Brisbane and Mooloolaba, and they're important forums because the members of Parliament attend these forums, and they need to hear the truth, but they also need to see the number of people who are standing for the truth. That's really an impact on them. So please, if you can support them, please do. There's also an e-petition on the Queensland Parliament website, and I'll speak to you more about that just before afternoon tea. So the Health Committee, who are examining laws to end the life, are reporting back in November this year. The 30th of November is when their report needs to be back, and then next year it will be discussed in Parliament. So your members need to be contacted, they need to be provided with sound information, and they need to be asked to vote against the introduction of a death system in our state, particularly when we are not providing an adequate health system. But we do not want a death system. Now, ACL continues to fight against sexual exploitation in all of its forms. This is for the sake of our children's well-being. As a grandparent, and I know many of you have walked this journey with me, I am sick to death of advertisers ignoring any sense of responsibility to our children and their right to their innocence. And so for that reason, we did really celebrate the recent national decision to finally remove wicked campers messaging from the roads. It took too long, but that's good. It's great to get a win, but there is so much more to do. And so much more to do, particularly, I guess, for me, in the area of gender fluid ideology. It's only recent that the concept of male and female has actually become controversial. The idea that gender is fluid and something you can choose is part of a newly established orthodoxy that actually has no scientific basis. It's a bizarre experiment in which our children are guinea pigs, and the laboratories are our educational facilities in our schools. Children are purposely targeted there by preachers of post-truth doctrine, and they are being forced to unlearn the difference between boys and girls. We cannot and we will not be silent on this. Our children's minds should be formed in truth, in goodness and in what is right. So I want you just to consider a few statements here with me at the moment. Solomon's advice in Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Our children are little sponges and they learn so very much in their childhood years. We understand that this is not a promise, but this is a proverb. But this is something that you also hear many other people speak of, perhaps in a different way, and I'm going to share that because our children learn so very much in their childhood years that will either stand them in good stead or the opposite. This is a good fellow. He's St. Francis Xavier. In the 1500s, he said this, "Give me the child until he is 7 and I'll give you the man." But Lenin said, "Give me 4 years to teach the children and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted." Hitler said, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." And Stalin said, "Education is a weapon." And so when we see our children being targeted, this is exactly where it's coming from. Our children are prey. I was in a plane this past fortnight, coming home from Townsville with Professor Olver, and I was in Virgin, and the Virgin magazine celebrates in there the life of a young boy who has been a gay drag queen since the age of 7. Now, to identify a 7-year-old, or he's 12 now, and in the magazine he is identified as gay and a drag queen, makes me so angry. That this little boy is identified as a sexuality. This little boy who is 12 years old is not a sexuality. He is a little boy who has been exposed to adult concepts since the time he was 2 years old, when he was sat in front of the TV watching drag queens. This little boy's name is Desmond, and he makes me very sad, and I'd like to gather him under my arms. But last November, our Australian Labor Senator Louise Pratt stated that Drag Queen Storytime is a wonderful idea, she said. She said it celebrates diversity, and she said, "I know that children and families will really enjoy this family-friendly celebration of LGBTI culture." Now that was Senator Pratt in November just past. And I want you to know and think carefully about this. Senator Pratt is currently the chair of the Senate Standing Committee which oversees education. So how did we get to this? Well, in 2010, and many of you know this, but I think it's worth repeating, Australian schools introduced the Safe Schools program. It was supposedly an anti-bullying program, but after reading its contents and finding little mention of bullying, but rather a very heavy focus on the ideology of gender theory, parents across the nation became rightfully outraged, because at the core of gender fluid ideology is the claim that feelings determine reality. And this is despite the fact that with medical intervention, around 90% of children who are confused, who feel confused about their gender, will embrace their natal sex through puberty, a process which, of course, is actually prevented by puberty blockers, which are given to children as young as 11 in our country and even younger. Children who are confused about their gender, again, need our respect, our love, our understanding, but above all, they need the truth. If somebody is suffering from a medical disorder or an eating disorder, you do not agree with the person who thinks that they're overweight and they're skeletal. You do not agree with them that they are overweight. You lovingly tell that person the truth. But neither do you stick a cream bun in front of them and tell them to be quiet and just eat up. You walk with that person through the confusion that is very real for them, and you walk with them to newness and wholeness and an understanding of what the truth is, and that's what our children need. The most thorough research on transgenderism has been conducted in Sweden. It's been conducted over 30 years. And I understand also that Sweden is one of the countries that is strongly supportive of transgenderism. But the research documents there show the lifelong mental unrest of those who have followed through with sex reassignment. 10 to 15 years after surgical reassignment, the suicide rate of those who have undergone sex reassignment surgery increases to 20 times that of comparable peers. So this is absolutely tragic, and it should make our educators and medical practitioners and politicians put a stop to the indoctrination occurring in our schools. But the opposite is happening. Despite psychologists warning that children who are confused about their gender do not need puberty blockers or amputation of healthy body parts, gender ideology continues to be taught and encouraged in our schools. The latest report shows that children as young as 3 are being referred to gender clinics in our nation. And sadly, Queensland has showed the biggest jump in referrals of children to gender clinics. We've jumped from 48 referrals in 2014 to 603 children last year. So nationwide, we are treating younger and younger children with treatments that can be permanent. Gender transition treatment is not safe for children or adolescents. It leaves children infertile later in life and is not in any way able to be made in the child's best interests. How do we even think that a child will be able to give fully informed consent? And I say to those people who are saying that it's a good thing, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. And I also say to them, stay away from our children. Yeah. So this is the sort of rubbish that's being presented in our schools. Many of you will have seen this book. In 2015, Australian schools introduced the gender fairy. Inside it tells you, and on the back cover, only you know if you're a boy or a girl. This is for 4-year-old children. It was written for 4-year-old children. At the time that it came out in 2015, Peter and I had 2 grandchildren that age. The little girl inside is crying, screaming, upset, because in the speech bubble, and you ought to understand, 4-year-olds don't read yet. So they are looking at the pictures and they are being read this book. And the little children who see this little girl, she's angry because she wants to be a boy, because she wants to play soccer. It just doesn't even, the stereotype in that is incredibly offensive. And the little boy is hiding under his bed, sad and crying because he wants to dance and somehow be in a pink tutu. I really, really don't get the pink tutu, because I'm looking around, there's a lot of women in here and none of you are wearing a pink tutu, so I'm just not getting the stereotype there, but it's probably a little bit disappointing that you didn't do that, because that would have been pretty fun. Last year, the Genderbread Person program was introduced in our Queensland high schools. So this program teaches that everyone's gender is fluid. So it's not just some people that are confused, everyone's gender is fluid. It was introduced in our local high school. It says that we all exist on a spectrum, and this spectrum actually changes throughout the day. So it changes. It says that it swings from male to female or anywhere in between. The stereotypes again used in this are breathtakingly offensive. In his effort to prove that gender is flexible, the author gives an example of how this plays out in a normal day for a student. And he describes this. He describes waking up and eating like a Viking. And that is actually, in his mind, a male trait, eating like a Viking. But he describes then female traits, and he describes female traits as prowling, skipping, playfully placing items of clothing out to wear, and pleading with your partner to help you decide what it is you should wear that day. I would never ask my husband what he thought I should wear. That's what's been taught to our high school girls. So, the thought of women being ditzy and men, the female being ditzy and the male eating like a Viking is just... And so I went to Grace, our Education Minister, about this program, and she heartily endorsed it. So there's a lot of confusion out there. Evidence that children are being confused by early and constant exposure to transgenderism is not hard to find. So we've got referrals of Australian children to gender identity clinics, as I said, have skyrocketed in the past 5 years. This is not something I'm saying, this is something you can just go to the paper and find. Children too young to even know what a puberty blocker is are being directed by adults into renouncing their natal sex. And educators are normalising the use of hormonal treatments to solve complex issues that are related actually to mental health and identity. The implications of gender fluid ideology in sport is astounding. Virtually all elite sports are segregated into male and female competitions. This is because males, on average, have longer limbs, males have larger rib cage, larger organs, heart, lungs, bigger hands. Their legs are actually more vertical due to a narrow pelvis, and the list goes on. The male body is actually optimised for physical performance. And the female body, on the other hand, is built to be able to bear children. Not all females do bear children, but that's how our body is actually built. But ignoring this, the International Olympic Committee relaxed their eligibility criteria to enable people born male to compete as women, and this is what they've done. They removed the requirement for genital reassignment surgery, so there's no requirement anymore, and they've also increased the level of testosterone that is allowed now for competitors in the female competition. And so what you see then is the sort of thing that happened at this year's Pacific Games held in Samoa. The winner of the women's 87 kilo division in weightlifting was a man who identifies as a woman. Now, the female competitor who should have come first and came in second, she was denied the gold medal by lifting 7 kilo less than the man lifted. So that's not even close. And so the second place came second to a man, and she was angry. And when the man was asked about competing against women, he responded, "I think you have to be true to yourself." So he has previously represented New Zealand in weightlifting as a man, and this time he represented New Zealand as a woman. There is a madness taking over the minds of so-called progressives. I think just look at Canada at the moment and what's happening in the Human Rights Tribunal there. Maria De Silva is a beautician. She works from home because she's got young children. A man identifying as a woman asked for an appointment to have his genitals waxed. Maria said to him that she did not provide that service, so he complained and she has been referred to the Human Rights Tribunal. There are many good reasons why a woman would not want to provide a service which requires her to touch a strange naked man's private parts in the privacy of her own home with her children present. And yet this is precisely the sort of nonsense that is actually being supported by progressive politicians. It's been enabled by the media, and it's actually being shoved down our throats under threat of being taken before tribunals and punished. Transgenderism is primarily a socio-cultural and political phenomena. It's fuelled by both social contagion and groupthink social processes, and it is ridiculous that this marginal theory is being written into Australian law. When I say that, it's because it's affecting our legal documents such as birth certificates and many other legal documents, and it is equally ridiculous that anyone who questions it is automatically branded as transphobic. We are living in an age where the existence of objective truth is being denied, but this is not an option for the child of God. Jesus said, "I am the truth." We saw that picture on Dave's message earlier this morning, the picture of Jesus being asked, "What is truth?" And Dave said the question should be further, "Who is truth?" Jesus is where our answers are found, and he tells us that God created man and woman. This truth is actually backed up by science. There are two sexes. There's two sexes. There's XX and there's XY. And anything that is a genetic abnormality even can still be classified as male or female based on the presence or absence of the Y chromosome. There is no Z and there is no W. And cosmetic surgery and cross-sex hormones can't change us into the opposite sex. They can affect appearances. They can even stunt or damage some outward expressions of our reproductive organs, but they cannot turn someone from one sex into another. There's a philosopher in Princeton University, his name is Robert George, and he put it like this. He said, "Changing sexes is a metaphysical impossibility because it is a biological impossibility." Sex is not a spectrum. Sex change is physically impossible. Transgendered men do not become women, nor do transgendered women become men. All become feminised men or masculinised women. They are counterfeits or impersonators of the sex they want to identify with, and to assert anything else is actually a cruel lie for these people. It's a cruel, cruel lie. It will never provide the long-term wholeness or happiness that people seek. If we love our children, If we seek the kingdom of God and his glory, we must continue to fight for truth, to be freely spoken in our classrooms and in our public spaces. And this is what the Australian Christian Lobby seeks to do. We are called to shine like stars in the universe as we hold out the word of life. And as we do this, I would say to you, it will actually not be possible to escape conflict. Because when we identify with Jesus, we are part of a war, but we didn't start the war. It was God who declared war on Satan. But we are in a war. And what is really important is that if we suffer for Jesus' sake. And we suffer for righteousness' sake, and not because we ourselves are being difficult or proud, because we hold the truth. And I think that that's what Dave was trying to say this morning. We need to suffer because we are suffering for Jesus' sake. And that is what ACL is committed to doing. I can absolutely promise you that. There is a big difference between the offence of the cross and offensive Christians. And I would ask any of you, if you have ever seen people in ACL being offensive, to let me know, because I haven't seen it. I don't see it. Right throughout the marriage campaign, when I watched Lyle Shelton talk on the TV, I saw a gracious, kind, compassionate man who wanted the best for Australia. When I watch Martin and he speaks on the podcast and everything, I see a young man who wants what is best for Australia. I don't see a man who is sure of his own worth. I see a man who knows what he is worth under God and what Australia actually deserves. There are many compelling ways that we can actually speak the truth, and many Australians are waiting for sensible voices in this space today. I just flicked past it, but my books are trying to do just that. I've done some children's books that are about just little girls being little girls and boys being boys, and there is nothing stereotypical in my books. We commit to speaking the truth in public and in love. And we are going to, I've got one more lady who's going to come and speak straight after me here now briefly, and then we're going to go to Bindi Kolchoka, but Janine's going to come up. Maybe Janine, if you start coming up to me, where are you? I can't wait to hear from Janine. So as Janine comes up, I'm going to, as we go out for afternoon tea, I will speak more about this, but we're going to ask you today to say with us, we will join you. And there's a number of ways that we're going to get you to do that, but we're really hoping that today will inspire you to actually say yes. I mean, you're here, so you're already with us, I know that. But we need to stand shoulder to shoulder. There are actually things that you can do to help us. So I'll give you more of that. You will have received, or you will receive, a text on your phone with some links, but don't look at it during the next two ladies. Look at it in the afternoon tea break, okay? No one get your phones out yet.